Hey everybody, this is Rydo and we're back to video game news for Monday, October 21st. So I'm starting a little bit later today. I had planned on starting earlier, but I got distracted wiring a 120 volt AC motor to a smart switch with interlocking mode. So because the motor fan is a wall exhaust fan that is reversible, which is completely different wiring than what you would run into as far as a ceiling fan setup. And so putting a smart switch on it required finding the right smart switch and crossing your fingers and hoping not to die when wiring the whole thing up, making good estimates as far as how many amps would actually be pulled through the smart switch relays versus how many amps might be pulled through the motor. And so it was all very experimental, and I don't like to experiment particularly at 120 volts AC logic circuitry. That's the kind of electricity that can easily get you killed if you make a mistake. So yeah, but I got it to work. The only thing that was slightly interesting outside of the circuit diagram that I had that the switch provided is that as motors need some kind of starter, in this case it was a capacitor that was connected between the forward and the reverse lines, and so I tried it without the capacitor and nothing happened. But I also don't think I severely damaged the motor, although I could have by doing it that way. And then I put the capacitor in and then it immediately worked. The capacitor charges up from either one side or the other and then will discharge once it's at full capacity, giving you a burst in one direction or the other of voltage, giving the motor a burst in forward or reverse directions, which makes it a very simple circuit with only really 2 or 3 components before you put the smart switch in. The one thing that I was not expecting there, and yes, I know this has nothing to do with video games, was that the shutters for when the fan is exhausting or intaking air open based on the original pull string switch. So there's just a spring attached to the switch, which is used to both reset the switch on the pull string. You pull it once, it goes forward. You pull it twice, it goes back. Pull it 3 times, it goes off. All of that is connected to a spring, which is connected to a lever that opens the shutters on the back. Now, when it's exhausting, the airflow itself will just blow the shutters open. They're lightweight plastic enough to do that. But when it's intaking, going the other way, there's not going to be any airflow in forcing it open because they don't swing backwards. Which means in the intake mode, which I'll probably not use very much, the motor is going to struggle to get air through the cracks around the shutters, and in the outtake mode it is going to work a lot easier. The whole thing is also not very bug proof or airtight by any means. Of course it's not. The instructions also said put it like 7 feet in the air as far as a wall exhaust fan, which in fairness that probably is the right spot to put it, but it's not where I'm putting it. I'm putting it much closer to the ground, which, who knows, maybe there will be some animals or insects that come through it. It's all very experimental, and the only reason I'm doing that is I had a cat door in the wall, got rid of the cat door, so now you have a hole in the wall. So put an exhaust fan in there, occasionally take what is the buildup of bad gases and CO2 that is just breathed out by humans inside of a house, just exhaust that for maybe just a minute an hour, maybe 5 minutes an hour. Because of the way these motors are set up, it's a little bit risky to try and slow down the fans, so they are just going to run at full speed. So you're probably safest living with that. There are plug speed adjusters for fans like this, but then you're putting less voltage into the motor, which could underpower it, underclock it, and cause trouble. So yeah, that electrical wiring project is what kept me busy earlier today, amongst some other things. And then I will say, to get back to video game news, is I spent the weekend working on my new YouTube short generator program with OBS, and I have pushed the maximum that my video card can really do. It's effectively close to, it's bigger than 4K. It's maybe 5K resolution. If that would be the right way to guess on it. It is super high. In fact, it is a 19 by 20 tall, 10 by 1080 wide image on the canvas in OBS to make one YouTube short. And then I have 6 of them going at the same time, which means in real time the shorts will play in this 3 by 2 grid and run for 3 minutes, since YouTube shorts can now be 3 minutes long, and make the footage. And then that is saved into a lossless file, and then it is chopped up from a 3 by 2 grid of 6 YouTube shorts into 6 individual YouTube shorts at the 1920 by 1080 portrait resolution, which, chopping it up, takes a while. It takes, I think, roughly 6 minutes to do all of them, maybe a little bit more than that. It might even be 12 minutes. Yeah. I think overall I calculated it that the whole process is taking about 12 minutes to make 6 3-minute YouTube shorts, which would be 18 minutes, so it's saving me 6 minutes. But it's still a long time. Definitely still a very long time. But yeah, it's saving me a little bit. My video card and CPU just aren't going to be powerful enough to recompress the images. I do think the quality I've raised up quite a bit too, which that's a lot of what I did over the weekend, was certainly just seeing how can I make this footage look as good as possible. But yeah, theoretically, if I had some super powerful graphics card or a super powerful CPU, I could be rendering more frames per second at a higher rate. But if I bought the newest graphics card possible, it probably still wouldn't work. You probably would have to get to a point where you're running servers that have CUDA cores built into them, and a lot of CUDA cores built into them. CUDA cores are what I think AMD or NVIDIA uses to do hardware acceleration for rendering frames, and you probably would need special software to send off that rendering. Now, anybody who's worked with video in a non-live environment knows that rendering video takes forever, and you often are rendering less than 60 frames per second in a second, and so it can take 2, 3, 4, 5, 10, 12 times as long to render a single video. But that is something that I have bent over backwards in my YouTube channel career, if you can call it a career, to avoid, and do everything live to tape in OBS. Unfortunately, if I did that, that would be slightly slower in this one scenario. And this trick only works to make 6 YouTube shorts at once, because the audio is the same in all of them. So you'll do a batch of 6 that will play one song and hope that when they get scheduled based on their release date, they're not all bunched up together, although it doesn't really matter too much, even if they are, because you won't see them in the shorts feed back to back. Then you make the next batch with another song, and then you make the next batch of 6 with another song, and just go around in circles that way with however many open source public domain songs I'm using. But yeah, suffice it to say, I didn't play any Punch Club, but at least I did work on my YouTube channel, and there's still a lot more work to do. Not really seeing anything here on the chart. I am noticing, though, all of my tabs are out of order like crazy, and for some reason YouTube loves this chart. It makes this the default thumbnail every time now as far as live streams go. So I don't know what it is specific about this chart that catches people, the algorithm's automatic thumbnail generator, attention. And in fairness, it really isn't what I'd want the thumbnails to be. Although I don't know what I really would want the thumbnails to be for these live streams. I doubt anything here has really changed on this list either. The Steam Next Fest is still going on. I guess it's ending today. With wiring up this wall ceiling fan, I think I am officially done with all these side projects that I've been rushing to finish to meet a deadline, and so I'm now more free to get back to trying to focus on my YouTube channel exclusively. Although not really exclusively, I still have a medium-sized emergency that is taking up all of my time. Yeah, I nearly got into a car wreck even. Had to slam on the brakes today, which that always gets the heart pumping. But yeah, my smart Tuya doorbell seems to be working fairly well, although in fairness, while I did get a good deal on the doorbell itself, the amount of work and spending at least $50 extra to get a HDMI to AHD converter to then send the video feed that is coming from my security cameras into the doorbell as a secondary doorbell. So basically it thinks it's the back door that video feed. That was an extra little expense. Wow, I'm gonna have to take a bathroom break immediately here. Alright, well, there's no reason to even delay it, I think. So I'm gonna just go ahead and pause recording. I also think I fixed the network issue, and it was easy as kind of rebooting my ISP's router. I need to find a way to monitor it when it messes up like that. Anyways, I'm gonna have to take a break. I'm gonna pause recording and I'll be right back. Okay, I'm back. As I said before, I think I figured out what was wrong with my network issue where I was dropping frames. I'm not seeing it today so far. Simply rebooting my ISP's router seems to be the issue. That being said, I'm not sure that I really want to go back and try and get back to dual streaming on Twitch. Twitch has, I've given it several months of an attempt, and it's proven itself to be fairly useless. Maybe one person in one stream has commented, which is far fewer than people comment on my YouTube channel, live chat, which at least there I've gotten 4 or 5 people commenting and having full conversations back and forth. Plus, Twitch itself is not getting any better. Nobody's growing their love and their heart for Twitch, and they're not offering any new services or any new features. Contrast that to YouTube, which at least throws out new features and changes things, even if what they do is usually pointless and stupid. So yeah, I don't think I'm going back to dual streaming on Twitch. I think there was something else I was gonna talk about, but I can't even remember it, so it must have not been that important. Let's go through the Video Games Chronicle news headlines as fast as possible, as much in order as possible. So, Vampire Survivors is getting a Castlevania DLC later this month. Vampire Survivors Ode to Castlevania will be the biggest DLC pack yet. Which, yeah. It definitely seems like there's a lot of nostalgia for Castlevania, considering how little actual Castlevania has been made or released in recent decades. Yeah, it does seem like Konami, I think is the owner of Castlevania, is just licensing it out, which in a lot of ways I guess that is just Konami's way of operating now, is that they're going to license things out and then make money without actually putting any effort into it. I'm noticing though, it looks like these stories in particular are not quite big enough. More tweaking still could be done. This in particular. Silent Hill 2 patch fixes more than 30 bugs. Version 1.04 is available now. Yep. Full patch notes available, I guess, if you want to check it. Black Myth Wukong will be available physically on the PS5, quote, very soon. The game was recently rated by the ESRB, which I guess inherently, if you are just releasing something on Steam in the United States and the West, you probably don't have to get an ESRB rating in that case. It's only when you want to release it on physical, which means you want to release it in stores, that the stores will start requiring ESRB ratings. Oh, I remembered what I was going to talk about. Another gadget I got is I found this baseless floor lamp, which really it's not a floor lamp. It's an LED strip with mounting brackets designed to be at a 45-degree angle, so you can put it in the inside corner of walls. And it's pretty nice. It's pretty bright. That's the main thing that you'll find, is that you could probably find a decent controller, but getting decent LEDs that have the level of brightness you want is going to be tougher. And since this is ideally something you would put in the corner of a room instead of a standing lamp that takes 1 foot by 1 foot by probably 6 or 7 feet, but in reality the entire floor to ceiling of an area, having something that can light up the room that's only taking maybe 1 inch by 1 inch floor to ceiling saves you a lot of square footage, or cubic footage in that case, for the same level of brightness. And like most smart LED strips, it has a range of features, most of which you'll never use and are kind of pointless, and its color gradient is not amazingly great. You have to make it think it's projecting something much closer to yellow to get white than what it thinks white is, which is more of a purplish color to it. And that's very typical in LEDs that don't have extra separate white LEDs on them. So an RGB strip versus an RGBW or an RGWW strip, if you're going to use it for lighting in particular, RGBWW would be what you would try to target, but also just targeting something that's white only might be better if you're really just going for lighting in the room. The color aspects are not actually that necessary. Cob lighting in particular instead of individual LEDs, if you can get it bright and brighter for lighting, often I think is the future of these kinds of smart devices. But the general point is less floor lamps, more square footage for other things, for activity, more room for activities. Of course, you have to have kind of a square room for these corner LEDs, and they're not as tall as you'd like in that they don't go completely floor to ceiling in a 10 or 12 foot room as far as floor to ceiling height. So they more than likely are Chinese products first, designed to squeeze into smaller, shorter houses. I wouldn't be surprised if your average ceiling height in a Chinese apartment is really approaching 7 or 8 feet, which seems to be about the right height. But yeah, you also don't really need to throw shadows on the ceiling to have a light go all the way to the ceiling, or onto the floor to go all the way to the floor. The lower you get a light down to the floor, the better you're going to see the dirt and dust on the floor, which is not something you really want in your general lighting. Might be something you want when you're cleaning. But just the fact that it's at a 45 angle and it just has double stick brackets is an intriguing thought. Of course, not sure I really need any more of them at the moment. It's going to come down to what rooms I start decorating as far as how dark they are. Mostly the room I'm having to remodel and redecorate is going to have a overabundance of light. So floor lamps or any kind of lamps are just not going to be needed. Once in a blue moon, there will be a stormy night where the overhead ceiling fan will provide light, and that'll be good enough. Clearly, though, I'm increasingly, my head's not in the game with these news articles. Just getting distracted like crazy. And it's not like I'm even talking about video games. Like the Cardcaptor Sakura game I'm still playing on my phone. Tinkafuma I'm still playing on my phone. Memento Mori I'm still playing. In fact, I'm having a decent time still with Memento Mori, and Tinkafuma's fine. I wouldn't play Tinkafuma as an adult game if it wasn't an adult game. It's not that good of a quality game, but then it does have that just extra value if you're looking for adult games. Cardcaptor Sakura still sucks. I'm just rushing towards being done with it. But yeah. And that's certainly another issue that I recognize, is that a lot of my time day to day is being spent playing mobile games, wasting time. And I'm not making any footage around that when I should be making some footage around it. But I'm not sure exactly how I would do that. Moving on, we have a Video Games Chronicle article here saying Bluebird team claims it's finished making poopy games. We want to find our niche, and we think we found our niche. Which of their games, though, are they calling the are they saying were poopy? Because that's a dangerous line to draw and admit to. They announced their new horror game, Chronos New Dawn, in development. They made the Silent Hill 2 remake. I think in a lot of ways you would argue Silent Hill 2 was a poopy game in many aspects, but not in all of them. Let's see. Layers of Fear. I mean, I don't think Layers of Fear was a great game, but I also wouldn't call it a poopy game. What I think, if they were more articulate or thought this thought through instead of just an off-the-cuff conversations, would be that games like Layers of Fear had you just walking around almost on a roller coaster. I'm not sure you made too many choices at all in Layers of Fear, whereas games like Silent Hill 2 have you walking around in choosing different paths, picking up items, interacting with enemies, fighting off enemies, having actual fail states. And I would assume that their new game, Chronos, is planning on being even more of a complicated experience, more interactive. But yeah, the poopy descriptor is not one you really want to ever use unless you really are trying to say something. No, I just don't think you ever want to use that. It's an unprofessional thing to say, I would say, for any employee, even a manager or just an associate level employee, to say, because you're throwing all your coworkers under the bus. Because I guarantee you that you're going to have at least one coworker who does not feel that the game that was made in collaboration with them was poopy. I guess it really falls back down to, if you can't say something nice, don't say anything at all. Marvel Spider-Man 2 will receive no additional story content. Insomniac confirms the game will come to PC in January. I would assume that just means full stop final. Does Marvel Spider-Man 2 need additional story content? Probably not. Does this mean a Spider-Man 3 is being made? Probably. It would be a series that would make a lot of sense to just always continue forward in the same way that the Spider-Man comics have just always continued forward. Yeah, it doesn't make a lot of sense to not make new Spider-Man games. Maybe you slow down the pace at which they're released, but never fully stop making them. And so I would imagine any new story content ideas were just going to be saved up to be made into the next game. Although it is very possible that the next game is not made by Insomniac also. PlayStation would have to be incredibly foolish to not put all their effort and all their money that's needed into continuing Spider-Man games, considering how I'm pretty sure that the Sony license for Spider-Man movies also covers Spider-Man games, and so it's Sony effectively having the license to make Spider-Man games. So here we have some older stories, and so we may have some repetition here. Tales of Kinzawa Zal Studio puts the team on redundancy notice as it seeks funding. And that was pretty much it. So I guess not super surprising that there isn't a lot of news over the weekend. Now it brings us to Komatsu articles, which are kind of out of the way. Eden Zero action RPG launches in 2025 for the PS5, Xbox Series, and PC. I guess this is based on an anime, but I would say this animation style doesn't even really match the anime. I recognize this cat and this blonde lady, but the style looks completely different from what I've seen. Yeah, that seems more in line with the style. I don't think Eden Zero as an anime was particularly well received, and in fairness, it's been a very long time, decades probably, since the last anime was made that had a mascot cat like creature, or a mascot like creature at all, and ever be successful. Like, that's just not the style of animes that become successful and get made these days. Most animes these days are more serious than that, and definitely aren't trying to go for anything that even begins to feel like it might be kid focused or kid friendly, even if in that statement I'm talking about Japanese parents think it is kid friendly for Japanese kids, which that's very different from other parents around the world's opinion for their kids. But yeah, even the little mascot characters in Dragon Ball and Dragon Ball Z, if mostly decades ago Dragon Ball Z started getting away from the mascot characters. Yeah. There's nothing in these screenshots that really is catching my attention other than this blonde girl obviously is a center of attention in that she's being shown getting massaged, being in a hot bath, and changing her outfit. It is coming to PC though. Let's see, this week's Japanese game releases: Romancing Scarlet Grace 2, Revenge of the Seven, Sonic X Shadows Generations, and more, Call of Duty Black Ops Card and Cell, etc. So it's kind of a fairly long list here of physical releases this week in Japan. And we're just getting closer and closer to the end of the year. Like, roughly a week and a half and we'll be into November. Then 4 weeks from there you're into December. Is that? Yeah, that's it. Maybe 5 weeks till Black Friday. So, although I'm not sure games being released specifically in Japan have anything to do with Christmas or Black Friday, but they do seem to be released about the same speed and style and the same times everywhere else too. Here we have a game that's already on the follow list. While working on my YouTube Shorts generator, I probably closed a significant number of Steam pages of games that I was going to make a YouTube short on it, and the names will be messed up for some of the first test cases, but I think I've got it pretty well set, although more testing is needed, certainly, to make sure there isn't some other problem that pops up. Black Myth Wukong Physical Editions announced Update 3. Let's see if we... Let's see. 3 different statements. Black Myth Wukong still overwhelmingly positive. So I don't think there's anything else to say about it. Still would be a little weird for me to play the game just because you'd be playing as a monkey, but or the Monkey King. But I think I can easily get over that since I played as weirder characters in other games, I'm sure. The Outbound Ghost Reborn Edition has been announced for the PS4 and 5, Switch, and PC. Is this supposed to be a game I recognize? Because I don't. Yeah, I've never heard of this. The Outbound Ghost Reborn. Yeah. This must have been some game that came out a while ago. Karen is coming to iOS and Android. It's currently available for consoles and PC. This too is a game that was overwhelmingly positive in the past 30 days and very positive overall. This is a great example of something weirder that you would play as you're playing as this blob monster, using your tentacles and morphing your body to get from point A to point B. A fast-paced roguelike bullet hell game called Wand Project has added a Switch version. Now we're still having a situation where a lot of these games are things I just straight up missed. And I don't know why so many things fall through the cracks, but clearly it happens. Not all games that get listed on Steam seem to get listed on the newly released list. And this is wrong. I'm now going to go through the Gaming on Linux articles, which I still have not done everything needed for that. So, yeah, this is the Vampire Survivors Ode to Castlevania DLC. You can get the Atari 50 collection plus various classic recharge games in the Humble Bundle, which has several games that would be playable on the Steam Deck, which makes some sense. There's no real reason that it wouldn't work on the Steam Deck or shouldn't work on the Steam Deck. Factorio 2.0 and Factorio Space Age DLC are out now. It seems like almost like in direct competition to Satisfactory version 1.0 coming out. Control spin-off FBC Firebreak from Remedy aims for Steam Deck support, which increasingly that does seem to be that the baseline target support is going to be the Steam Deck as far as hardware is concerned, which if the Nintendo console that comes out next year is more powerful than the Steam Deck, then yeah, I could see the original Steam Decks, the LCD versions, the OLED versions, these first generation ones, being the minimal specifications for game development as far as what's targeted. More likely Nintendo's going to come out with a Switch 2 like device that is still not as powerful in many aspects as the Steam Deck, and then it will be the new minimum standard for much minigame development. Unfortunately, we don't really have a good way of measuring how many games that really is, though, because while we know a lot of games did try to port themselves to the original Nintendo Switch, it definitely wasn't 100% of all games that were coming out for the Xbox Series X and the PlayStation 5. No way. So, at a certain point, we'd almost have to survey the numbers to figure out how many games, AAA games, powerhouse type games, were ported to the Switch, and start to see what that percentage was compared to all games released in that time frame, and then start to compare those numbers with that same test on the Steam Deck, because there's still a decent possibility that a significant number of games will just never even be considered to have Steam Deck support as far as AAA powerhouse, power-hungry games. Cleared Hot looks like a nostalgic helicopter shooter I needed. Here we have yet another game that's being promoted. It definitely feels like maybe on gaming on Linux, the move is to pick out more games that, pick out games that are specifically maybe a little older but have Steam or Linux support. So these might be deeper dives, although that's not the case in this instance. This is just a brand new game that isn't even out yet. A snake like Paco Caravan, you can build up a huge conga line of trailers with a wobbly car. This is once again, I'm just talking about games. There is definitely a danger to that gaming on links will just have too many links towards new games. Duake puts the Doom guy in Quake. Interesting title. This is, I assume, just a mod. I guess the question really comes down to what is the thing that changes so much if you're playing as the Doom guy in Quake. I mean, really, you look at this and this feels like this just could be more levels of Doom, the original Doom. The interface looks 100% like Doom. The only difference is the enemies and the fact that in Quake you can look up and down, which just being able to do that changes quite a bit actually, and you have to look up and down to shoot. Where Doom, you are locked into the same plane So you can look left and right, but you don't look up and down. If you shoot something that's higher than you, it just auto locks and targets that person. That's the kind of mod in particular that would have made a lot bigger impact decades ago, back when Doom was a big deal. The original Doom was a big deal. I guess if you've already played Quake and you've already played Doom, it's something new. Proton Experimental improves Red Dead Redemption 2, EA desktop app, and more. I assume Proton Experimental just constantly gets updates. That is another danger as far as gaming on Linux, as we may find that most of the articles become somewhat repetitive. Although it's kind of hard to call an updated version of Proton that repetitive if it's improving something different with every update, which I assume it is. Marvel Spider-Man 2 comes to Steam in January 2025, which I guess technically gives me enough time to buy Spider-Man 1 on PC and play it, but I won't. Wine version 9.20 expands direct play and more formats supported by Direct 3D DirectX 9. Wine is the Windows emulator. Wine is not an emulator, is what it stands for, but for lack of a better description, it's an emulator it's a compatibility layer actually for Windows applications. Proton is gaming focused version of Wine. Effectively, they start with Wine, then they add more stuff to it. Valve does to make Proton. Yeah. SteamOS alternate Bazzite has added support for the 1X player plus improvements for the ROG Ally. I don't think Bazzite is ever going to go anywhere as long as there's enough of these garbage devices that need a third-party operating system just to make them slightly useful, and just general PC users who are looking for a SteamOS like operating system. That being said, if SteamOS ever does get released in a good form factor where you can just install it onto any x86 computer, Bazzite may not have very little reason to exist at that point. Yeah, and certainly there's very little that would make me want to stay with Windows at this point. Although I probably said the same thing about Windows 7, and now they're about to pull the plug on supporting Windows 10. Halls of Torment hits 1 million sales. More free updates are planned. Red Rogue C looks like a deck building pirate version of FTL, Faster Than Light. This might be another case also of my macro not being able to open the news articles in the appropriate way, and so it's just opening all of them instead. That may be a problem in particular because Gaming on Linux seems to put their articles in random order. 20 most played demos of the Steam Fest in October being highlighted here if you want to check out this article. And then Assassin's Creed Mirage arrived on Steam as Ubisoft returned to the Valve store. That's going to bring us to GameDeveloper.com, which, let's see, this article here is from February of, no, when, this is October 21st. So High-Res Studios pulling the plug on Divine Knockout and Realm Royale Reforge. Let's go ahead and just open these articles. Just to see if we've covered them before. Very few of these articles are that new. So there's an obituary for Mike Breenan, Digital Extremes artist who passed away at the age of 50. Best known as Minky, Breenan provided art for Warframe, Dark Sector, and The Darkness 2 during his 14 years tenure at Digital Extremes. Which, if he died at 50 and he worked for 14 years at Digital Extremes, that would mean he was 36 when he started there at the latest. 50 is not particularly long, particularly old to die. And spending over a fourth of your lifetime working at a single place certainly is something to think about for all people, as far as just he didn't have that many 14-year tenures to go with. Yeah. Particularly if you start to think of your first 14 years being mostly a waste because you're stuck being a child and incapable of doing anything you really want to do and being forced to go to school. Yeah, that's pretty much true for your first 18 to 20 years, is that you're stuck not really having decision making authority. I suppose that's just more evidence to do your best to try to cherish every day you do have. Eat, drink, and be merry, for today shall surely be your last. BFI has issued £510,000 from lottery challenge to back a dev-focused aid projects. This is a weird headline. British Film Institute basically had a lottery. It's funny to call them the lottery, but whatever. So the British Film Institute is funding some dev-focused aid projects. They will tackle challenges facing the UK gaming industry and help indie developers look more appealing to potential partners. I would say that the thing I'd be concerned about if I was going to try and get in business or do business with a British video game company is going to be the general housing issue more than anything else. Yeah. At a certain point, I don't think immigration, which I know the UK people talk about that a lot, I don't think too much of that is going to play a role as far as video game companies. But the housing issue certainly does seem like that's probably going to be an issue. And just local council issues and local governance issues. That's what I would want to dive deep into, is how many people can afford to live in an area to be the hiring base from which I might hire new employees if I was doing business there, and how many of those people actually have the talent there. There's probably a lack somewhat of video game specific education in the UK. That would be my guess. But in general, I think there's also just a lack of people. It's a small island that, yeah, doesn't particularly offer too much there. I might also be concerned about just general laid-back attitudes and public over drinking of the UK people. Just fall into some real stereotypes there, I'm sure, that aren't really issues. But yeah, I would have much bigger concerns also, though, if I was trying to get in business or make a video game company in many other countries, though, too. Every country's going to have some problems, but making a video game company in the middle of Iran, for instance, is going to be major issues. Or North Africa would be major issues, or Brazil would be major issues. And just as far as how the governments work there and how business is done there. A European Court of Justice has ruled against Sony in the PlayStation Portable cheating lawsuit. Sony lost the case against UK peripheral firm Daytel, failing to ban Daytel from marketing action replay products. Interesting. It's kind of funny that Sony would even be pursuing action replay products for the PlayStation Portable, considering how they are not making a PlayStation Portable. But I guess this is a decade-old lawsuit, so it's been going on for a very long time. 2012 may have been around the time the PSP was still being made. They found the German Federal Court of Justice found action replay lawful on the grounds that it does not change or reproduce either the object code or the source code or the internal structure of the organization of Sony software, which inherently means it's probably like a Game Genie, where it puts everything into its own RAM and modifies things that way before sending the information further to the PlayStation Portable. PlayStation Portable is much more interesting to talk about than this lawsuit for what it looked like. It was a sleek bit of kitsch as far as a portable hardware device. For its time, I think the screen was pretty good. I think the buttons these days would be considered pretty mushy and not really what you would want. And certainly it has a lot of buttons going on here. Dedicated music button, dedicated maybe video out button, volume minus home. It has a keychain hook, that's very Japanese, and a bright yellow 5-volt barrel jack plug, which that's pretty old too. The batteries inside pretty much any PSP at this point have probably exploded and pillowed out. There might have been some Wi-Fi connectivity to it, but it would have been early Wi-Fi A or B standards. It would be slow by today's standards. The resolution here, I imagine, is small. I had there are some triggers, but no bumps. And there's just one analog stick, so it's kind of hard to bring it into the modern layout where you'd have two analog sticks. It really is just a thumb pad. I had a desire at one point to see if you could squeeze a Raspberry Pi into a PlayStation Portable's case, and there was a project going in that direction, but that project never really got to a finalized version fast enough for it to make sense. And in the time that that project has tried to get to a final point, even the Raspberry Pis have become a little weak. maybe you could put a Raspberry Pi 5 compute module in one of these, but it's not really worth it at this point. You'd spend so much money that you're just going to be halfway towards a Steam Deck when all is said and done. Well, probably not, but you're still better off just buying a Steam Deck. Okay. Let me see if there's any other news here that I maybe overlooked. Double Dragon Revive Physical Edition is going to be distributed by Microids in Europe, Australia, New Zealand, Middle East, and Africa. That's actually old. Details on the mystery Nintendo Switch Online playtest program have been shared. More light has been shed on the test, which starts later this week. Says it has spoilers in it. I don't really think you're gonna spoil too much. It appears to be an MMO of sorts in which players work together to fully develop a massive expansive planet by utilizing creativity and farmed resources. Interesting. Well, Nintendo being extremely late to the party is very Nintendo as far as MMOs go. And certainly you have a different kind of audience that you might show an MMO to. But yeah, I imagine the first Nintendo MMO is going to be a new IP. Maybe it would have a Mario outfit or something like that, and then they're going to experiment with it, see if it goes somewhere, and then eventually I wouldn't be surprised if they hand over the reins towards making a Pokemon MMO, which would make a lot of sense, where making a Mario MMO makes a lot less sense, since there really is only one Mario. But you could have a Mario World MMO where there's just people playing as Goombas or Toads, nameless characters like that. And certainly it could cross genres and just be all Nintendo licenses in one MMO. But I still think that would be their second MMO. It is very ambitious for them to try to make an MMO, for as bad as their online services have been up until this point. But it certainly is kind of the target audience. If Minecraft, for instance, had been an MMO, it probably would have at some point peaked even higher than World of Warcraft. But the programming around is probably very difficult to do. Although there are public servers of Minecraft that exist with lots of players. Moving on, the name of its Take-Two studio Hazelight's next game has seemingly been revealed. Are they going to actually say it? S-N. That's not really revealed. If it's just like, why would you? You have S and then a bunch of asterisks and then a bunch of asterisks and an N. So what's the name supposed to be? So apparently it doesn't say. Maybe it's this picture here from Twitter. there's a real argument being made that the amount of people posting on Twitter has gone down quite a bit. Yeah. I'm not quite ready to make the jump there towards trying something which I assume it would be like Blue Sky. Now, I have no idea why my macro somehow clicked on help. But then again, I also have no idea why these tabs are so out of order. Bandai Namco is going to publish a medieval fantasy RPG from former Witcher devs. It's the debut title from the Polish studio Rebel Wolves. This would be the devs of the first 2 Witcher games, not Witcher 3, which is the one most people would probably be interested in. I've talked about that multiple times. Okay, well, after jumping around a bit, we have now gotten back to the point where we started as far as all new games on Steam, so let's go through these very quickly. The goal here is to pick what games. Here's the Silent Hill 2 update for gaming on Linux. I missed that one. Anyways, the goal here is to pick what games to make YouTube shorts on very quickly before I have to take yet another bathroom break. The problem, I think pretty obviously, is that I drink a lot of water while streaming, and then it is also just the chair I sit in and sitting upright, where I spend a lot of my time actually laying down. All of that works together. And it is a bit of tension too. Actual just physical and mental stress when you're in the hot seat, when you're live broadcasting. There is just this small thing. Now this one catches my eye quite a bit. Now, is this a officially licensed game? I would bet no. That does also point out to something. Here's another game based on Manos: The Hands of Fate, which I think that's public domain, whereas the Rocky Horror Picture Show, I don't believe is actually public domain. I think it is owned still as an IP by Columbia Pictures. That would be my guess. Although it is certainly an interesting thought as far as niche movies, underground movies, all of a sudden getting video games built on them, particularly if you're making 8-bit games that are in line with the kinds of games that could have come out when those movies came out. Although in that case it's not even true. When the Rocky Horror Picture Show actually came out, you'd be lucky that you would have even been able to get a Pong game or an Atari game. And nobody wants games that look that awful. And it certainly does make me think as far as what would be the best way to make something around the Rocky Horror Picture Show if you're going to make it an interactive video game. I just don't think it works particularly well Well, I guess in a lot of ways, though, the rights to the Rocky Horror Picture Show might be in the hands of the creator of the play, the Rocky Horror Show, that's still done in the UK in theaters. So maybe he licensed it. But that does get back to my thoughts. Let's see, a free and open source space strategy shooter called Unvanquished. Get some big updates. Because it's play first, you have that very linear storytelling, and I don't think you really would want to mess with the linear storytelling, particularly with it being a musical and songs being played and sung. So I have no idea how you convert something so linear as a play that has been converted to also a linear format of a movie. I don't know how you make that into a video game. If you're going to do something like that, I think you probably start more simply and just have a themed card game or board game made to start with. Something more manageable. But yeah, what are you going to do with as far as video game? You're either going to have a game over in the sense that you didn't move the story forward the way it was supposed to go, or you're going to have the story go forward exactly as it should go. There's not a lot of time that takes place where scenes skip days or hours or even minutes in the Rocky Horror Show anyways. We have another game from Gaming on Linux. The thumbnail of Gaming on Linux looks too much like the Steam thumbnail, so that's why I'm not seeing those articles. Yeah. There's not even a lot of action in the Rocky Horror Show, so I don't know how you can make a video game good around that. So I imagine they're bad games. Subnautica 2 arrives in early access with 4-player co-op in 2025. I am just rushing. I think we're close to the end, but also I think at some point I may just have to give up the ghost and cover the rest of these games that might make YouTube shorts off screen. We're getting more political things. Those games look like it might be going for more of a death metal, black metal art style, which a game around that style might be interesting. But yeah. Well, I think I'm going to call it here. I only have a few more games that I would go through anyways, but yeah, that's going to be it for the stream. As always, I ask you to like, share, subscribe, comment, and keep on watching. Bye.